Very cordial good morning and good afternoon to all of you. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to the fourth meeting of this group. I of course regret that we cannot meet in person still. I realize that we have not really had a chance to celebrate our joint achievement of the Innovation Policy Outlook together in person yet, but we are hopeful that we can visit your beautiful countries in 2022 and also invite you to Geneva. We have quite an ambitious agenda for the next 3 hours. It is structured around two parts. Part one is a policy dialogue session on a topic that featured very prominently in the Innovation Policy Outlook, innovation policy governance, and the role of innovation councils in innovation governance. And then part two focuses on an update on relevant work streams on joint planning and also defining the scope of this group going forward. Allow me to mention a few housekeeping rules. This meeting will be recorded. Please use the raise hand function if you would like to intervene in the discussion. The moderator will then give you the floor. And please switch off your microphones unless you are given the floor by the moderator. It is now my pleasure to invite our Director for Economic Cooperation and Trade, Ms. Elizabeth Turk, to take the floor and to give opening remarks. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Jakob. And I was just the one who did not have the microphone muted, I guess. Dear participants, dear colleagues, dear partners, it's really a pleasure for me to welcome you to this fourth meeting of the National Focal Points and to discuss our cooperation on the Sub-Regional Innovation Policy Outlook, the IPO, for the Eastern Europe and Southern Caucasus, to discuss this and to discuss other related projects. And I'm very happy also to co-open this session with Sanna Leinel from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. And here I'd really like to thank the Swedish government for the very generous funding they have given to our work with the 6 countries in Eastern Europe and the Southern Caucasus. So really a very warm thank you to Sanna and to the Swedish government. But it's also for me to congratulate all of you, participants of the team and of the group of the 6 countries, and to congratulate you for how positively this IPO 2020 has been received. And here I would really like to thank you for the support you also, the representatives of your countries, have provided to us, and also for the readiness you have shown us to continue this work in Eastern Europe and the Southern Caucasus. I'm really proud to hear that some of the recommendations of the IPO, they are already being put in practice. So it's nice to see that it's not a document for the shelf, but it's actually a document with policy recommendations that is being used, that hopefully creates positive change and positive impact on the ground. So that's something we can all be very proud of. Now, I would like us to build on that success. And I think some forthcoming iterations of the IPO publication and can be issued, and we can really also deepen our cooperation through different Unicity work streams. So the IPO is one of them. The follow-up capacity building activities in the region could be others. Now, the IPO group, which is meeting here today, and I understand it constitutes a different variety of stakeholders, I think the IPO group is now really well established. And what is very important, it has built considerable trust among the participants. And there is the question, or there is the vision, that we can also use this group and the momentum. And that's why at UNECE we have proposed for the group to meet regularly in a little bit more structured fashion. And in my view, there would be a significant number of benefits from that. For example, that we can coordinate our activities, that we can inform better the work of the next edition of the IPO. And maybe that group can also be used a little bit as a hub for policy dialogue or as a forum to discuss sub-regional issues of common concern, to present your national practices and work streams. And I would imagine that this exchange of views and that this sort of like regular interaction would be to the benefits of all if we kind of strive to develop innovation policies for sustainable development and for the Agenda 2030. Now, if we would go down that road, that would also allow us to enhance the impact of the relevant existing ECE instruments. And we can maybe replicate some of them, we can maybe scale up some of the existing approaches, and we can really strengthen our efforts very much in line with the mandate from the UNECE Commission to support innovation as an important tool and also as a driving force to develop impactful and measurable solutions that promote the circular economy. You might know that our commission in spring this year, it was devoted to the topic of the circular economy. And it's clear that if we want to transition from a linear economy to a circular economy, that innovation has a key role to play there. We really have to do things differently. We have to find new solutions. The economic actors have to find new solutions. So innovation very much is at the center of the circular economy transition. And circular economy very much is at the center of UNECE's work, not only for the Division on Economic Cooperation and Trade, but really for the House as such at a much higher and broader level. So I would imagine that the group we are meeting here today, you really have a potential opportunity to play a role in that larger process as well. Now, but having said all of this, I shouldn't only come up with ideas and suggestions and further activities, but I'd really like to thank you all personally, the national focal points, the local and also the international experts, and also our international partners, including the Swedish embassies in the sub-region. And I think we've been collaborating with all of you very, very closely in the past month and years. I'm also very pleased that we could work together with WIPO, with OECD, with the European Commission's Joint Research Center and with the Horizon program. And all of that has really allowed us to explore different ways of how we can sort of more fully capture the benefits of the complementarity and the synergies that our international support has been able and can create in the region and in support of the Eastern Europe and Southern Caucasus countries. But none of this would be possible without your dedication and without your substantive and organizational inputs. So here really for me to say you that has been very, very valuable to the project, and I hope that we can continue this in the months to come. Now, if we think a little bit about today's meeting, in that spirit, and I think with that idea of creating a certain sustainability for our joint work, the group, your group, is very important because it can guarantee continuity and cooperation, and it allows us to build policy capacity jointly. And I would say that the willingness and the eagerness for the group to meet regularly, it's been really one of the biggest successes of the innovation policy outlook. Maybe that's actually a success that is even more important than just the plain text of the beautiful booklet we created. And in my view, meetings of this group, they will be central to shaping the next iteration of the IPO, and also to kind of identify really where the policy challenges are and what are the good practices for the elective topics that we will have, that you will explore. Now, today, what concretely will we do today? And I'm sure Jakob will guide us through this meeting in more detail. But we basically have a dedicated first segment where we have a policy dialogue on innovation, policy coordination, and innovation councils. And here I'm really delighted to welcome one of our guests, one of our academic experts, Professor Charles Edquist, amongst us. And Professor, a very warm welcome. Thank you for being with us here today. And after sort of like an update on the UNECE work streams on innovation, I think we will look at how we can shape future efforts to the interim iteration of the IPO. We will hear from our international partners, from their work on innovation and the resulting synergies. And we will also discuss the future group of the future work of this group. So I think that's a very rich agenda. And for me personally, unfortunately, I won't be able to join all of the meeting, but I really have it on the top of my priority list to stay personally involved in the activities of this group and in the innovation policy work we are doing in the division. And I'm very much ready to support and to join and to chip in where I can, because I think it's really a very valuable and promising project. So with this, I thank you for your attention. And I wish you very insightful and fruitful discussions at today's meeting, and very much look forward to what will be the results and how we can jointly take it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I would now like to pass the floor to Ms. Sanna Leno, Program Specialist and Advisor from SIDA, from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. Sanna has very closely been following and supporting our work at SIDA, and yeah, has been very supportive and enriching to our various project streams. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob, and thank you, Elizabeth, for excellent opening remarks and for really setting the stage. And I will try not to be a parrot and to repeat too much of what you said. But since I've been given the chance, I'm really happy to say a few words from my side. So thank you very much. And I hope most of you know that Sweden has a long-standing commitment to sustainable development in countries in Eastern Europe. And it is, of course, needless to say within this group of people here today that innovation is at the very center of sustainable development. So therefore, it's a great pleasure to see all of you here today. Thanks for having me. It is also very good to see Swedish experiences being leveraged for innovation policymakers in your countries. Professor Charles Edqvist is participating in the discussion today based on his experience with Sweden's National Innovation Council. And I also know that our State Secretary of the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation, Ms. Stina Billinger, participated very recently as a keynote speaker at the launch of WIPO's Global Innovation Index. This is fantastic, I think. And as you are all very well aware, support for innovation-led growth is also very timely. As Elizabeth also mentioned, innovation is essential to strengthening economic resilience, not least in combating socioeconomic challenges in the context of post-COVID recovery. For example, linkages between science and industry can modernize industry practices that are not to the expense of environmental protection, and that may instead contribute to a more sustainable post-COVID recovery. The Innovation Policy Outlook, the IPO, which very much brings us here today, is a valuable tool in shaping public policy towards enabling and encouraging innovation. And it has already begun serving as a comprehensive evidence base for countries to utilize as a roadmap and a change management tools for policymakers. But the IPO is a lot more than its findings and recommendations. I really think, Elizabeth, you were also touching on this point. I really think it is a lot more than its findings and recommendations. It is, in fact, a learning journey that we are all very much part of, and we are very happy to have been part of that from the very outset. SIDA is also very happy to note that the IPO has brought to life this group gathered here today. It really is a sign that there is real urge to keep learning from each other, and that follow-up work to the IPO is being taken very seriously by all partner countries involved. And so, of course, the next step now is to explore more ways of how to materialize the benefits of the IPO, to deepen cooperation and facilitate an active dialogue between all of your countries. I think I mentioned briefly in our last meeting where I participated that Sweden is very much in the process of developing a new strategy for our development and reform cooperation with Eastern Europe. And this strategy will guide our work in the sub-region for the next 7 years to come. We are currently waiting for our government to adopt and expedite this new strategy, but it is very safe to assume that sustainable development and inclusive economic development will be cornerstones for our work in the region for many years to come. So in other words, Sweden and SIDA continues a strong commitment to this sub-region, and we are, of course, very much looking forward to our continued collaboration with the Unicity and all of you under this initiative. Thank you again for having me here, and I wish you a very, very fruitful meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sanna, for these kind opening remarks. I will now pass the moderation to my chief of section, Anders, for the first segment of the meeting. Anders, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. Good morning, everyone. Thank you also to Sanna and the government of Sweden for their support, and to everyone for attending this meeting. As we already advertised, we wanted to take a couple of steps towards formalizing and upgrading the work that we do in this group, and maybe also in an expanded circle. And one of the elements would be to have regular policy dialogue sessions. We will discuss this in the second section of the program. We have a couple of suggestions for you, but this will be sort of a trial run that we're doing right now. The idea is to do them around the topics that we decide to cover in IPO. And of course, one of the topics that has come up and that we discuss regularly is the topic of policy coordination. And different ways of resolving them, specifically what we could generically call innovation councils. And what we have in mind is a relatively high-level body with some decision-making authority, and maybe with a secretariat and some working groups on specific issues, and with some systematic engagement, but of course not too much engagement of the private sector and civil society. So we need to balance autonomy and embeddedness, as Roderick likes to call it. This issue has come up in all countries, and in fact, it's not an issue that's easy to resolve, even in some of the most successful countries. We've seen a flourishing of different experiments. We'll talk about one of those experiments, at least today, namely the experimentation of consolidating the relatively fragmented Swedish innovation system. Now, coordination is important for two reasons specifically, at least in my view. One is to align and to ensure synergies and avoid duplication among, and ensure especially a catalytic role, because remember, innovation policy should make sure that more people try out more things than otherwise would be the case, for a whole range of policies, including many that go outside of what we might traditionally think of as innovation policies. This could include education policies, most importantly, any kind of direct support to the private sector. So this is what Roderick would define as industrial policy, but we might think of it as entrepreneurship policy, as incubator policy, as industrial policy, or as SME policy, and sometimes as regional development policy. Because remember, the private sector are the ones, they are the drivers, they are the ones that are going to go out there and try out the ideas. So the policies that apply to them are highly relevant to innovation, and that's why you need these coordination mechanisms. The other role that these kinds of councils could play would be to channel broad initiatives around specific problems or challenges or opportunities. Matsukato, for instance, calls this mission-oriented innovation policy. You pick a challenge, let's say the circular economy transition, and you have a couple of pilot projects coordinated by a council like this that involve several different policy areas. Most notably, as I think our speaker will point out, public procurement, which makes up between 10 to 20% of GDP and has a lot of power on the demand side. It could also be the fourth industrial revolution, or maybe a topic in the fourth industrial revolution. And these will naturally involve multiple policy areas, and often the private sector, and sometimes even maybe social policy. If you want to take the advantages of flexible working and what some people call the gig economy, you also need to make sure that you have transparent and efficient mechanisms to cover the most vulnerable in an environment where fixed long-term employment is decreasingly the norm, and maybe shouldn't be the norm, because the transactions costs have actually fallen. We should take advantage of that. So there are many innovation council type arrangements, and if they're done well, they can be part of the solutions. But of course, as our expert, Mr. Edquist, will tell us, there are many trade-offs involved. These involve the control and policy consistency versus freedom for experimentation, control of budget allocation, overlapping strategies, what to do about monitoring and evaluation, because you need to ensure some kind of independence. What to do about vested interests and the incentives to maintain the status quo. For instance, if you speak to the private sector as they are right now, they will define the current level of technical development and, of course, also eventually their interests. So there are trade-offs to almost any kind of normative statement that we can say about these councils, which is why it's important to try things out on a smaller scale and see what works and see what doesn't. I like to think of the reason why Switzerland, the country where we live here, is so successful despite having on the surface, incredibly complex governance arrangement with basically most public sector functions duplicated across 26 cantons. Some cantons only have a couple of thousand people. And I think one of the reasons is that cantons try things out. They see what works, they see what does not. Other cantons are watching them. As soon as someone comes up with an idea that works well, other cantons are likely to do it. So it's this kind of dialogue and knowledge exchange and experimentation, and also certain cooperation and competition at the same time, that might be one of the reasons why Switzerland turns out to be, as we see this year again, the most competitive economy in the world. And this, I think, is part of what we want an innovation council like this to do, to create sort of a dynamic like this. So with that, we turn to our speakers. We'll start with Mr. Dmitry Plekhanov from ETH Zurich. He's also been helping us on IPO, and he will give a brief overview and a typology of the Innovation Council type arrangements that we found in our research, and what might be working, what might not be working. And then we'll introduce Professor Edquist to talk about his approach to the topic and also his role at the National Innovation Council in Sweden. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. Today, I would like to talk about the national innovation systems and the role of innovation policy coordination in it. The national innovation systems in Eastern Europe and South Caucasus have differentiated division of competencies and responsibilities. And this division has horizontal and vertical implications. So there is division on horizontal level among sectoral ministries, and also vertical one between national government authorities and some national government authorities. And this type of division of innovation policy responsibilities gives the rise to two challenges of innovation policy coordination. So first of all, there is a horizontal policy challenge, a low division of mandates among central government authorities on innovation policy that results in duplication of functions, fragmentation of efforts and resources. And the second challenge is vertical policy challenge, insufficient participation of subnational government authorities, municipalities and regional governments in innovation policy making. Countries of Eastern Europe and South Caucasus have a fragmentation of efforts with simultaneous overlaps in some areas of innovation policy that results in lower efficiency and effectiveness of innovation policy in general. And to overcome this challenge, countries in Eastern Europe and South Caucasus started establishing innovation policy coordination councils. The councils typically include representatives from line ministries, academia, and sometimes members of the business community. However, these initiatives are still very nascent and are not entirely effective. They have unclear mandates and they don't meet on a regular basis. The State Committee for Science and Technology of the Republic of Belarus is operational, but it is mainly oriented to the needs of research policy. It doesn't include innovation policy in a broader way. The Georgian Research Innovation Council and Ukrainian National Science and Technology Council are not fully operational. So there is a need to re-establish these agencies to support effective innovation policy coordination. And Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the Republic of Moldova are still working on establishing functional innovation and research councils. Many innovation agencies and institutions responsible for innovation policy in Eastern Europe and South Caucasus are still very new, still very nascent, and there are no effective coordination channels among them, among new institutions, and incumbent, so to say, old government authorities that used to be responsible for some parts of innovation policy making. Innovation policy initiatives, they oftentimes developed in isolation, and they don't include feedback from the business sector. And this isolation from the needs of the business sector and the private entities results in a lower effectiveness and can result also in undesired negative consequences for the functioning of national innovation systems in these countries. Currently, representatives from the business sector and the private sector are not included as members in national research and innovation councils, and that represents one of the big challenges for the functioning of these councils in long and short terms. There is also a number of problems related to multiple reporting lines among government agencies involved in innovation policy making, and a certain degree of bureaucratization that creates problems for flexibility of innovation policy making and also timely response to existing challenges. National government authorities with responsibilities for science and innovation policy need to pay attention to 4 key areas of innovation policy coordination. So there is a certain need to establish or revive mechanism for innovation policy coordination, especially pay attention to the fiscal allocation of in the context of innovation policy. There is a need to create means to resolve conflicts related to innovation policy among government authorities. There is also a pressing need to balance policy consistency with flexibility to respond to emerging constraints and opportunities. And also government authorities, both at central and regional level, need to foster synergies across national strategies on science, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And with that, I would like to pass the floor to Professor Charles Edquist.
Yes, I'll just say thank you very much, Dimitri. I'll just say a few words to introduce Professor Edquist. Professor Edquist is from Lund University, and he co-founded the Center for Innovation Research and Competence in the Learning Economy. That works out to be CIRCLE. And he's also a member of the Swedish National Innovation Council, which is chaired by the Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, and maybe soon our first female Prime Minister when he hands over the reins. Better late than never. Professor Edquist will talk about innovation policy councils as well as principles and good practices, based in part on his work in Sweden and also on his work on holistic innovation policy, which is, at least the way I see it, the way of putting into practice the systems perspective to apply it for policymakers. I find Sweden interesting for several reasons, and of course it's a complete coincidence that we are both from Sweden, and Sanna is from Sweden. In fact, I never really lived in Sweden, so I've been observing this from a distance, but it seems to me that innovation policy in Sweden, especially applied research, was highly fragmented for a long time and sector-based and outside of policy realm and direct policy intervention. And the most productive role for government was not clear, especially after the radical reforms in the 90s, where some of you might know we had a severe financial crisis and we cut government spending by over 30%, one of the most radical cuts in peacetime history, as far as I know. and instituted relatively strict fiscal constraints. There were several initiatives, some worked, some did not. I think Professor Edquist can talk a bit about some of the conflicts and considerations that came out. For instance, the conflict between the need for autonomy and flexibility and the need for control, the risk for bureaucratization, the risk for creation of vested interests, and so on and so forth. And maybe he can also talk a bit about some of the issues that Dimitri mentioned and give some initial guidance. Professor Edquist, floor is yours. Your microphone is muted.
Well, now it's not.
Now we can hear you. Please
Okay.
Go ahead. If you could keep it to 15 minutes, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Well, that's going to be hard because I've been asked to talk longer, but I'll try. The first picture here, it says innovation coordination mechanisms, and it would actually be better if we called it, I saw now, innovation policy coordination mechanisms, because that's really what I'm going to be talking about. Next picture, please. I will touch on the history of innovation research and innovation policy in a very, very fast way. And the background is that innovations are so very important for all economies. It's a matter of being the source of 75 to 90% of productivity growth. And productivity growth is the whole source of increased salaries, higher profits, and more taxes. That is social and economic welfare. And it's also very important for sustainability and CO2 emission questions, which are so important now. And when the linear model, it's about 70 years old, and when it emerged, it saw innovation as generated by a process consisting of well-defined consecutive stages, like basic research followed by applied research, development work, creating new products and processes, and also in growth and employment. It was a very partial view, emphasizing basic research very much, and it was a supply push view. You see no demand here in this picture. It was sort of linear. It followed from the basic research to the growth and employment. However, research does not automatically lead to innovations, and research is never sufficient to achieve innovations. Many other forces and factors and causes are important in order to achieve innovations, and all that is what following innovation. Then came the innovation systems approach. Now about 40 years ago, around 30 years ago, around 1990. And these innovation systems, they are normally defined in terms of determinants of innovation processes. It's a matter of cause and effect. The causes are the determinants and the effect are the innovations. This innovation systems approach, it's not only a supplement to the linear model, it has actually replaced the linear model among innovation researchers. You cannot hear, there are maybe 7,000 or 10,000 professors of innovation studies in the world, and I cannot find a single such person who would subscribe to the linear model. And as you can see, systems of innovation in quotation mark has 14 million hits at Google, which is remarkable. Next picture, please. And Anders mentioned that I want to talk about holistic innovation policy, and that actually includes all public actions that influence or may influence innovation processes. And this can influence both the speed and the direction of innovation processes. And in this holistic approach, the demand side is also very central. It's not only, as the linear view, it's not only a supply push and linear view. And this holistic innovation policy can rely on a systems of innovation approach. They go together, and it requires a very broad and general definition of systems of innovation. As you can also see that it's a fairly new expression, holistic innovation policy. It has only 5,000 hits at Google. Several of the speakers have mentioned that there are many forces, many determinants, many causes that influence innovation processes. And of course we have R&D. Education has been mentioned, and many of the others have been mentioned. Formation of new product markets. Well, that's the demand side. Creation and changing organizations. That's for example, entrepreneurship, creating new firms. Interactive learning is very important. And creating and changing institutions. That's the rules of the game. It's also very important. Incubation was mentioned. Financing of innovation processes are of course very important. And this is my way of talking about a holistic innovation policy. It includes all these elements. And these elements are also the hypothetical determinants of the development and the diffusion of innovation. And they can be said to define an innovation system. I'm actually just now working on a report or paper where I reformulate all these things and talk about cause and effect to a larger extent, which means that I'm in the process of trying to formulate what you could call a general theory of innovation, which is of course very ambitious. In the list here, in the squares here, you cannot see policy, and that is because innovation policy is part of all these 10 activities. Next picture, please. Thank you. I have been saying that the systems innovation approach has taken over in the world, in the realm of innovation research, but it has not taken over in the policy area. Innovation policies pursued in practically all countries are still partial and linear. And you can hear that every day. You can hear that from the European Commission, you can hear it from various state leaders and so on. And it is exemplified or indicated by expressions like science and technology policy, research and innovation policies, innovation, science and technology policies, and so on, which Dimitri mentioned earlier. These kind of councils or organizations, they do not generally deal with innovation processes. This means that innovation, next picture please, that innovation policy instrument, they are very dispersed. That has been mentioned here. Well, and that is this dispersion that actually leads to the need for coordination. If innovation policy shall develop as a separate or a separate policy area, and I think it will. we have seen many new policy areas emerge in recent decades. For example, energy policy, environmental policy, climate policy, and innovation policy might be the next, given that it has so enormously large impact on the economy, on the environment, on the climate, and so on. And there are therefore many discussions in many countries on how to achieve the coordinations I'm talking about. And one country where this discussion has been pursued is Sweden. And the Swedish National Innovation Council, NIC, is one example of a mechanism that coordinates the main innovation policy instruments. I will tell part of that story, and I think my article in Research Policy, which describes it in detail, has been sent out to all of you if you want to have more details. Since 2015, Sweden has a National Innovation Council, and it was created by the Prime Minister, and it is also chaired by the Prime Minister, and he has never been replaced by his deputy, or there is no deputy chairman. And this NIC consists of 10 external advisors from industry, unions, academia, and also 5 ministers: Minister of Finance, Minister of Industries, Minister of Research, and Minister of Climate, except for the Prime Minister. And the Secretariat, which is very small, is placed in the office of the Prime Minister. That is, it is placed above all ministries, which is important. And as I said, the Prime Minister is personally chairing the meetings, and they are 4 to 7 hours, 4 meetings per year, which means that the Prime Minister spends 4-5 days per year on this council, which is a lot for a Prime Minister. The agenda is created by the Prime Minister and his staff, and others can also propose issues for the agenda. No reports are written by the members of the council. There have been other councils in Sweden, and they have been writing loads of reports, and nothing has happened. And that's the problem in many countries. There are other mechanisms of taking care of things. Presentations are held by ministers, council members, ministers, and others, external council members, and invited experts. And then comes the particular mechanism for coordinating, and there are even no official minutes are taken, only informal notes which we all can take sitting in the meetings. And the state secretaries of the 5 ministers, they have meetings after the council meeting to discuss what to implement and how. So this is a very informal way of using the ideas that have emerged in the discussions in the council. I will now, in the next picture, please, can I have the next picture? Oh, well, that may be too much then. The issues discussed, I'll be quick now. Many issues in the boxes have been discussed. It has been discussed in a holistic manner. Innovation policy has been discussed in that manner. And there are 2 in my article, which you can read. There are 2 examples, and that's about state risk capital provision, and then it's also innovation enhancing public procurement, which I call functional public procurement. Those are important steps that have been leading to decisions in government and in the parliament, and it has had a large impact. And this means, and now the next picture, that there are separate policies for innovation and research. The dominance of the linear view in the research policy community, cements the linear approach to innovation policy. And there are at least 20, 30 countries with some sort of a council in this policy area. And these councils almost always deal with research policy and not with innovation policy to any large extent. Innovation policy is considered to be a footnote in many of these councils. And one way to increase the degree of holism in innovation policy is to separate innovation policy from research policy. That's the same as saying that innovation policy might or will develop into a separate policy area. And this is reflected by the fact that we have two councils in Sweden, and I think that's the only country, except also France, that has separate councils for research policy and for innovation policy. And the Swedish National Innovation Council is not a science and technology policy council. It is focused on innovation policy. And the other is very old and nominated by research policy. So they are two, and I think that is a good solution, that having two of these. Next picture, please. Some results. Well, Swedish innovation policy has become more holistic during the 5-6 years, and the Swedish National Innovation Council has played a major role in this transition. And the conceptual specifications, they have been important. The terms like innovation systems, holistic innovation system, functional procurement, and so on. And I believe that to some extent Sweden can serve as a role model for other countries in these respects. And there are many, next picture please, there are many types of councils. There are the old linear councils, there is the Swedish Innovation Council, there is a French Conseil de l'Innovation, and there is the European Innovation Council, which is mainly focusing on financing. And there are other types of coordination mechanisms too, and I think it would be an important task to really investigate which these types of coordination mechanisms are, which are good ones for what purposes, and which could be used in some countries but not in others. And there may exist in the real world or not. They might be constructions, and they might exist in the Unicity countries or in other countries. Next picture, please. Which is the last one, and it lists the free publications that I've been basing this presentation upon. It's a book on holistic innovation policy. It's the article on the Swedish National Innovation Council, and it is another article on functional procurement for innovation, welfare, and the environment. I did not have time to talk too much about procurement here, but maybe we have to save something to another occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Edquist. Again, this is one of the topics that we propose to elaborate as a chapter, and topic that we know are of concern to you. So I now want to open the floor for comments from the countries, especially the national focal points. Questions that you might have for Charles, based on his presentation, his approach, and the experience in Sweden on several issues, or also some comments about what you are planning in your country and what would be useful to cover in these chapters, and also, of course, to comment on at this stage. So you can put your hand up by clicking on the hand in the upper bar. I don't see any hands right now. So we have Belarus. Olga, please, nice to see you.
Good morning. I'm very happy to see you all after the long break. I didn't want to be the first, but the others keep silence, so I will start. First of all, I would like to thank Professor for the wonderful reading I had yesterday, his article. Actually, I am absolutely honest, it was the best professional read within the last years. So I'm quite prepared for my today short intervention, and I would like to start with saying that I think it's a confusion in Dmitri's presentation, where he spoke about the State Committee for Science and Technology of Belarus as a kind of research or innovation council. It is not. We should speak about the other body, which is the Commission on the State Science and Technology Policy at the Council of Ministers of the Republic of Belarus. It was set up in 1998 with the aim to develop proposals for the government on shaping and implementation of the state policy in science and technology. The terms of reference that guide the activities of this commission were updated last time 10 years ago, in 2011. It was at this time when the activities related to innovation were added to that. They include, for example, a defining of priority areas of innovation activities, developing new forms of the state support for innovation, and so on. Actually, not so many. At the same time, the title of this commission and also the goal, which is mentioned in the terms of reference, was not changed. So up till now, it's the Commission on Science and Technology. The commission is chaired by the Prime Minister, and of course this demonstrates the priority of the topics which it discusses for the state and the country. From the practical point of view, it's probably not so easy, because to find a niche in the schedule of the Prime Minister is not always easy. At the same time, probably you know that the Prime Minister is not the superpower in the Republic of Belarus, but many important questions are taken to the level of the President. The Secretariat is placed in the office of the Prime Minister, that is superior to all ministries, and it's okay. However, the key role in preparing agenda and the content of the meetings belongs to the State Committee for Science and Technology, which I already mentioned, and which plays the role and is ranked as a Ministry for Science, Technology and Innovation. And in fact, it is responsible for most of the issues which the Commission discusses. The difference, another difference, okay, with the Swedish case is the composition. The members are key ministers, for example, science and technology, education, economy, finance, industry, natural resources, but also the head of the National Academy of Sciences and heads of the leading research centers. There are also some prominent researchers without top administrative position. That means they are members because of their own capacity. But the difference is that according to the times of reference, there is no place for business representatives, civil society, that's it. And interestingly, those top prominent researchers which are in the council, in the committee, they all are from engineering areas, technology areas. There are no innovation policy researchers, but of course there is an opportunity to invite external advisors to this or that meeting depending on its agenda. The Commission meets regularly, 1-2 times per year. The meetings are formal. That means that there is minutes at the end, which is obligatory for implementation for the appropriate public bodies. The activities of the Commission, I would say, are not public because it is difficult to find in the open sources or media information about its activities. Another key interesting point is I've never heard that the Commission comes with a new initiative resulting from its discussions. Rather, it works as a collective mind that looks over the draft decisions on the most important topics of research and innovation at the stage when the interministerial consensus has been already reached, but before they go to final approval by the Prime Minister or the President. So to conclude, is there any policy problem behind such a setting? Yes, it is. It is about the narrowing down the scope of innovation towards promoting just innovative high-tech industries, and preferably based on local science and technology developments. It is about the research centered but not business-centered model, and about the linear approach that Professor spoke before. And of course, quite far from the holistic innovation policy. But at the same time, I am far from the thought that adding the word innovation in the title of this commission, or adjusting the terms of references, or even separating the Council on Research from the Council on Innovation will significantly change the situation. Because it is not enough to declare the innovation as a national priority, but sorry, but I will cite the professor now, an openness and political will to absorb and try out the new perspectives in innovation policy have to emerge. It doesn't mean that one should sit and wait until they will emerge. And therefore, I think that our meeting today and the activity which is initiated by the Unicity team is of high importance for my country. We will follow, we will participate, and we are waiting for some maybe recommendations, which I will try in my capacity of a focal point to bring at the highest possible level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olga, for your kind words and your honest assessment of comparing NIC with STST in Belarus. We are a little bit short of time, and we have Ukraine also asking for the floor. So I would suggest Ukraine makes a comment and maybe a question, and then I'll give the floor to Charles to respond to both points. And then I'll do a very quick summary, and then I think we will have a quick break and start with the next session. So Igor, good to see you here. You have the floor. Igor Yegorov from the Academy of Sciences in Ukraine. Igor, your microphone is off. Your microphone is off.
Oh, now it works, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Very quick comment. Thank you very much, Professor Edquist, for your very interesting presentation. And I see that Lund still keeps, leading positions in Sweden and in Europe, as a Center for Innovation Studies. That's great. Very few words about councils, Of course, Swedish example will be very interesting for us, but we have all our countries have different configuration of institutions. and we have to use, as I understand, only some best examples, or some features or fragments, of your innovation, holistic innovation system, to construct our own systems, because it would not be easy, to simply to use fully, this Swedish experience, in our countries. Situation is completely different. Despite Ukraine was mentioned as a country which has already, some working council, I have to remind you that this council is not working in a proper way, unfortunately. We have, this council headed by the Prime Minister, which have to gather, 4 times per year. But as I remember, during the last 4 years, we had only three meetings headed by the Prime Minister. Other meetings were headed by some other persons, ministers, and so on. And focus was not on innovation, unfortunately, but on science only, first of all. Science policy, distribution of money from budget, and so on. But anyway, idea of creation, working the body which will focus on innovation in our countries is very, very important. So thank you for accent on this issue, and again, thank you very much for the presentation, for the picture of which you have in such developed countries. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Igor, for your comment and your kind words. I'll leave the floor now to Charles to respond to the comments, and then we'll do a quick summary. And Jacob tells me that we won't have a coffee break. We'll move on straight into session 2. So Charles, please, the floor is yours. And you, yes.
I will first put on the microphone, yes. And I will only say a few words. I mean, I have loads of things to say in relation to these comments, but I will not, because I know we are short of time. But first I want to say that I don't say that the Swedish National Innovation Council is the role model for all countries. I think it is one example of one way to coordinate the very dispersed activities in the field that is relevant for innovation policy. There are other mechanisms that I didn't talk about. For example, you could have an innovation ministry or an innovation minister, and you could do it in different ways. And it would be important to lay out these different possibilities in a detailed way. Then I will just say a few things to Olga and Igor. The composition. Actually, the 10 people we sitting there, we did not represent any organizations. There were people there from big industry and from academia and so on, but we only represented ourselves. So that's one important thing. And when they selected 2 professors to be part of that National Innovation Council, they chose 1 professor of innovation, which was me, and 1 professor of environmental studies. So they really selected people that were dealing with things that are of current very, very large interest. And I heard that in Belarus there was no business representatives. Well, I think it's quite important that business is represented in a council like this. I shall conclude with one comment where we might disagree a little bit, and that is the issue of whether to have 2 councils or not. Actually, in Sweden, they tried. They had the Research Policy Council Forskningsberedningen. They had that since the 1950s, and then they tried to get innovation also into that, and they appointed two people that represented innovation research, and actually I was one of them also in that council, but it was completely dominated by people from the basic research world, and I and a colleague of mine who tried to push innovation issues in that research policy council, we failed completely. We failed to do that, and therefore the Prime Minister decided to not try this anymore, but to create a new council that focused exclusively or almost exclusively on innovation. Thank you for this. This has been a very interesting discussion, and I would be very interested in discussing more with you, Olga and Igor and others, whenever we get a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles. So I will bring this to a close, and then we'll pass to the next session. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is just a pilot. We will present a couple of options to you, and we'll invite your feedback on how to do these policy dialogue sessions in the future. I think one thing which is clear is that we need a little bit more time, especially with a complex topic like this. And maybe we can also think about some more systematic engagement from the countries along the lines that Olga prepared, and also address some of the questions that we need in the research to the chapters. So please think about this and prepare some feedback for when we get to that point in the discussion in the next session. I'll just say a few words to summarize the discussion, and I'll arbitrarily pick up on a few points because we're short of time. One is the point about the linear model versus the systems model of innovation. I think personally that the reason that the linear model is there is not because anyone actually believes in it, but because it fits with our standard approach to policy making and the incentives that we have and the way the system already works. And the exceptions you see to this are often done on a relatively small scale, and then once things work out, others see it. You have what we call demonstration effects, and you might see something along those lines. The innovation systems approach is, I think, very hard to put into practice. I think it captures many of the dynamics, but there's no knob, there's no lever. You cannot push on one knob and then automatically you get that result. You have to try things out, and that's a completely different approach to how we normally think about policy making. Then you have your actions, you plan them maybe for a couple of years. You have this step and you have this step, and that's supposed to have that effect. And of course, in reality, it often doesn't have that effect. So you need a system systematically to try things out and see what works and to stop what's not doing. And that's part of the role of this council. Charles talked about the many different areas that are involved in innovation. I won't go through them all here, but I think the point is clear. And I think the example that Charles mentioned, that they try to have a unified innovation council that brought together research and other areas, and it didn't work out, is an example of the kind of experimentation that is necessary. We don't know from the beginning what's going to work out and what's not going to. And Charles will have many examples if we do another session on this, on other things that didn't work out. And I personally think you can learn more from what didn't work than from what worked. Then we also talked about the experiences in EESC countries. We know that there are many initiatives, many are still nascent. There are a few coordination channels, and especially there's a flurry of initiatives along that are often called incubators and technoparks, and terms that are very often used interchangeably. And there's not really a strategic way of stepping back and making sure that what you're actually catalyzing things that wouldn't happen advice rather than subsidizing. Then innovation policy is often seen as constrained to science policy, and in some cases also technology and technology startup policy, but it's often in isolation from industrial policy, SME policy, and especially where a lot of the actual budget is for direct company support. There is also a tendency, and I think a trade-off towards over bureaucratization. Of course, if you add an additional layer and a matrix system like the World Bank tried out, you will also have additional layers of bureaucracy. So it's important to watch out for that as well. And then we heard about the experiences of Belarus, and some excellent comments from Olga, especially, but also from Igor, on comparing what is happening in their country to what is happening in Sweden. So I hope this is the first step towards further interesting discussions, and I think a really good chapter on this, of course, if you agree. Charles, you have your hand up. Do you have You are still muted. Charles, you're still muted. Okay, good. Well, that's it from my side, and thank you, everyone. Charles, when you can have your microphone on, please feel free to say something, but I have to leave over the reins to Jacob now for the next session, and thank you very much to everyone.
Thanks. I think Charles still would like to say something. Charles, you need to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I want to say something, and that is that we have just scrapped the surface of this whole area, and we have to remember that not only is innovation research a new research area, but innovation policy is not an organized policy area yet. And I think, given the importance of processes of innovation for all societies, I can see that it will develop, and I think that the UNECE can play a role in taking an active interest in this, and I think that is going to be important. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Charles. Okay, so let us move to the next segment of the meeting, which has a more kind of coordination and an operational focus. In terms of housekeeping, if you wish to intervene, feel free to raise your hand at any moment, and I will give you the floor as soon as possible. So we will start with an update on ongoing initiatives of our section at UNECE, the Innovative Policies Development section, and many of the projects and work streams that are relevant here are funded under the same umbrella project from Sweden. I'm joined by my immediate colleagues from the section who will make short verbal presentations. To start, I would like to pass the floor to Katja Adamu, who will provide an update on the work of our intergovernmental bodies. Katja, please go ahead.
Jacob. Hello, good morning, everyone. So just to give you an update on the upcoming meeting of the UNECE team of specialists on competitiveness and the innovation policies. I hope you all received the agenda that was sent to the whole network by email a few weeks ago. If you haven't, please let me know. I will send it to you, and all the information is also on our website. As you all know, we have this meeting is an intergovernmental meeting that happens once a year. The team of specialists sits below the Committee on Innovation, Competitiveness and Public-Private Partnership. This year, the meeting will be on 1st and 2nd of November. On the 1st, we meet in the afternoon at 3, and the 2nd is the full day. The first day, we have what we call the Substantive Session, which is a policy seminar, is a conference that changes topic every year. And this year is on the circular economy. In particular, the topic is leveraging innovation for the circular economy. We started discussion from the recommendations and good practices that the team identified on this issue in 2017. And we will have some member states and international organizations reporting on what has happened in the region in the past 4 years and how innovation policy can really be used as an enabler for the transition to the circular economy. So I really hope you can participate, and also please feel free to circulate the program and the agenda to your counterparts and to colleagues and experts in government, or not, because it's a multi-stakeholder meeting, so even private sector, NGOs or civil society representatives are very welcome to join. The second day of the meeting is more focused on our work. We will have a session on the reviews on Moldova and one on Uzbekistan. We will have a session on innovation policy principles. And in general, we discuss our work in the past year, and we also try to get a mandate or to get a feeling from member states of what would they like us to do next year. So you're very welcome to join the second day in particular, which will be dedicated to the work in your region and what can be done next year or even in the 2 years next. COS as a mandate for 2 years, and this year the mandate has just been renewed. Also would like to flag that this year we are renewing our bureau. At the moment we have Italy and Georgia who would stay on the bureau for the next 2 years, and we have contacted all the permanent missions of UNEC member states in Geneva to ask for nominations. So far we haven't received one, but if it will come in the next few weeks, so please feel free to also liaise with the permanent mission here or to contact us directly if you would like to nominate an expert from your country. That's it for now, Jacob.
Thanks, Katja. We'll make a point to circulate the agenda once more to all the participants of this meeting. Okay, so next I'm glad to invite my colleague Chris Athey to take the floor to provide an update on the Innovation for Sustainable Development review of the Republic of Moldova. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jakob. Yes, so I will just give a brief update on the Innovation for Sustainable Development review of Moldova. These are national reviews of innovation policy that we've been carrying out upon request from the countries for the past 10 years. The previous country that we completed the review of was Georgia, and we're in process on Moldova at the moment with the support of SIDA, Sweden's International Development Agency. We have completed the fact-finding and drafted chapters of this review, which are currently undergoing peer review by both international and national experts, as well as the national government as well. So we have the draft chapters, draft policy recommendations. Probably the key thing to mention is as we piloted with Georgia, in the case of Moldova, we have elective topics, which are priority focus areas selected in agreement with the national government. In the case of Moldova, these are industry science linkages, so the commercialization, etc., and also the innovation and technology transfer infrastructure, which is a priority for the government of Moldova. And finally, the diaspora, so the role of Moldovans abroad in promoting innovation for sustainable development in Moldova. As well as this, during the fact-finding exercise, we found some interesting examples from the agro-food sector. So we're including a case study on the agro-food sector as part of this review. Obviously, that can make an important contribution to sustainable development. We're intending, depending on the COVID situation, but we hope to have a mission to Chisinau towards the end of November to present an advanced copy of the review of Moldova along with the policy recommendations, sort of in a workshop, and to have some discussions with the key stakeholders. After that, we will be submitting as official UN publication by the end of the year, at which point it should be available for to be shared publicly. So we hope it will be useful also for the other countries in this meeting. I see we also have some of our colleagues from Moldova. I see Olga Trechakov and Sergio Bocescu. So good to see you in this meeting as well. And it's good to kind of share the expertise with other countries. So that's the status update on this review. As is the case with other countries, we will depending on obviously with the final policy recommendations, we will then agree a programme of capacity building support to follow up to the review for the next year or so. So we're talking about 2022, because we will have the final review by the end of December this year. And then we will have a, like I said, programme of capacity building support, which we will be agreeing with the national authorities in the coming weeks and months. So that's the current status. I will probably pass back to Jakub, I suppose, for the review of Armenia. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. So we're happy to announce that we are also embarking on an innovation for sustainable development review with Armenia. This review will follow the same newly developed approach that we have applied in Georgia and now also in the Republic of Moldova. We've engaged, but an early stage with this review, we've engaged key project partners. Our main interlocutor will be the Ministry of High Tech, and we will launch the project officially next year at a high-level virtual event. I'd now like to give the floor once more to Katya and also my colleague Lyudmila Tautieva, who will give an update on our capacity building work in Eastern Europe and the South Caucasus.
Yes, thanks, Jacob. So I would like to report on the activities we've been doing for the past 6 months, let's say, with Georgia. As you know, we followed the review with a capacity building program that is really decided with the government and tailored according to, on one side, what are the recommendations identified in the review, and then what are the priorities for the government and what kind of activities and support they would like to see from us. So in the case of Georgia, with the State Procurement Office, we have decided to proceed with the topic of innovation enhancing procurement. And the program is in two stages. The first is the development of a handbook on innovation enhancing procurement, which is really a review of best practices and case studies from the ECE region, a sort of a manual of how to do innovation enhancing procurement, with a final chapter with specific recommendations for Georgia. We just received the first draft that has been shared with the State Procurement Office, so we hope to finalize the product during the next month or two. And the second stage that Georgia requested is a study tour for 4 Georgian officials from the State Procurement Office that will go to one of the EC country to do, let's say, 3-4 days of study in one of the State Procurement Office there. So we are currently talking with 2 countries, Norway and Austria. Unfortunately for Norway, it looks a bit difficult, especially because the COVID-19 travel regulation. They impose quarantine even to people who are vaccinated. So we're talking with the Austrians to see if it's feasible to do it by the end of the year, or it will be done in, hopefully the situation will be better in Q1 2022. So this is about Georgia, and then Chris already mentioned we will be in touch with Moldova soon once the review is finalized, to present you some proposals, and of course we want to hear from you what you think would be most useful to follow up with a capacity building product from the review. And I'll pass the word to my colleague Lyudmila on the regional capacity building.
Grazie. And good day to everyone. Just a few words on the sub-regional capacity building. So we have prepared handbook on supporting innovative high-growth enterprises in Eastern Europe and South Caucasus. Thanks to all the colleagues from the EESC region who have actively participated in the interviews that we have organized to make this publication happen, and also in the trainings that we have conducted in March, which have been quite interesting and interesting experience also for us in having something online, interactive and useful for the countries. So the handbook is out live on the webpage and available for you to have a look at and also disseminate more largely in your circles. And we hope that we'll be able to have some support, follow-up support as well, following the trainings and the handbook, in particular for Ukraine and maybe a few other countries, if such support is voiced by our partners. So that's just a few words, and without further ado, I will pass the word back to Jacob. Thank you.
Thanks, Lyudmila. Thanks, colleagues. So let us now turn to the innovation policy outlook, which is at the core and also the origin of this group. We go to that slide. And then I will also pass the floor briefly to Anders to maybe add to what colleagues have said. So we've thought quite a bit about, let's say, the most effective way to move forward with this more comprehensive project, and also very much reflected on what we have received from you over the past month in terms of inputs and ideas. And on the one hand, I think there is quite significant demand from you to keep up the momentum of this process, to work on the implementation of the recommendations, but also to eventually track the progress of the many indicators that we have included. So to see how and where you are improving in building your innovation systems. On the other hand, the IPO is also a significant resource investment, especially for the national focal points. And it also takes time for policy and institutional changes to materialize and also to have impact. So there's also a case to be made that there should be a certain time window between iterations of that entail a full assessment. So what we suggest, and this is something we've already exchanged on with many of you, is rather than with this now imminent next version, rather than doing a full-fledged assessment across all the 60 indicators, to select or to focus on a select few elective topics and then explore these in more depth, based on a little bit of primary data collection, but based also on the help of international experts like Professor Charles Edquist that we heard this morning, and also using this forum, this group, to have dedicated meetings to explore the practices of governments in an in-depth discussion. And we think that by doing this, we'll build a capacity for the implementation of the recommendations of the IPO, and also create a time gap to maximize the impact of a second full-scale assessment. And so the logic, if you go to the next slide, Emanuela, here you can see a little bit the logic. We've developed the methodology. That's an investment that we don't need to make again. We've conducted now the pilot successfully, and we then would engage in 4-year cycles of full assessment, which are offset by every 2 years by an interim version that focuses more on developing some of the findings from the full-scale assessment, but also to build capacity to implement the recommendations. So that's how we see this next iteration, what we call the interim innovation policy outlook. We've also done quite a bit of stock taking on some of the topics that we could cover in this interim IPO, and my colleague Emanuela will present these briefly. We've shared those with you. Hopefully you were able to have a look, to already think what topics are most relevant to your specific country, and we can then discuss how to prioritize and which topics to select after Emanuela's intervention.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I will briefly elaborate, as you mentioned, on the suggested topics for the elective chapters. So on the slide, you will find a list of the suggested topics, which were determined through many bilateral discussions and also based on previous discussions with countries, out of which we aim to pick 3 to 4 topics to then discuss more in depth in the interim IPO iteration. And this sequence of topics also reflects which we think are most important and most relevant to the subregion. So if we look at the first topic, based on today's policy dialogue, and as Charles mentioned, we've only scratched the surface, this topic would then look at more in-depth, would provide a more in-depth sub-regional analysis on science, technology, and innovation councils in the sub-region, This chapter would begin with a broad discussion of the theoretical role of ministerial level councils with cross-cutting mandates, and it would be followed by an identification of common features, challenges among similar bodies already in place. And as we also mentioned, based on already gathered data from other work streams, as well as lessons learned from other countries, examining what worked well and what didn't. The second topic is to examine science-business linkages in the sub-region. As we know, science-business linkages are an important structural element of a functional innovation system. However, fragmented policy instruments in the region do not sufficiently stimulate cooperation or collaborative work between businesses and academia. So therefore, this chapter would look at the current state of science-business linkages, also based on the IPO and national reviews, and identify common trends and elaborate on typological differences between economies. The third proposed topic would be how to engage the diaspora to promote innovation, which also plays a significant role in economic development of countries. So it's an integral part, leveraging diaspora networks is an integral part to innovative development, with the potential benefits of being cross-border, knowledge absorption, investment in promising sectors, as well as spillover effects. So this chapter would look at diaspora trends across the sub-region, identify gaps, and see how we can further leverage the potential for fostering such spillovers. This chapter could also draw from national reviews and also selected case studies as required. The fourth proposed topic is on innovation performance. So here the suggestion is to develop a chapter based on the recently launched Global Innovation Index, the 2021 iteration. The Global Innovation Index serves as a useful tool to track and benchmark innovative performance, and the IPO assessment complements this by looking more closely at the role of policies and institutions. So here, with the potential cooperation of WIPO, we would look at the innovative performance of countries, sub-regional trends, common features, themes, outliers, and overall challenges and opportunities as well. The fifth proposed topic would be the rise in export-oriented services in the region. So most countries have seen a rapid rise of export-oriented ICT and business process outsourcing services, which has the potential to further drive innovative development. So this chapter would look at the nature, status, and the most salient features of the export-oriented services, particularly in software customization and business process outsourcing. The sixth topic would look at how to use the large potential of procurement to create demand and to incentivize innovative initiatives. This has also been mentioned previously. So public procurement budgets are quite high, are exceeding 10% of GDP in the region, which provides ample potential to use to create a predictable and sustained demand for innovation. So this chapter would examine specifically the potential for innovation enhancing procurement in the sub-region, also providing case studies on international and sub-regional best practices. And the last proposed topic, it would be on innovative high-growth enterprises, which represent which lead the way in experimenting with new ideas for creating value and also tackling sustainable development challenges. So the potential for boosting these high-growth enterprises is substantial, and there's already been progress in several areas, but to further enable, nurture, and promote these high-growth enterprises, this chapter would then look at specifically how to understand their needs, peculiarities, and dynamics to further develop support mechanisms to that make sure people try out more ideas and experiment. This chapter would be also largely based on the handbook that my colleague Ludmila mentioned earlier. So overall, the structure of these chapters, they would all end in sub-regional recommendations, in a series of sub-regional recommendations on each topic. And as my colleague Jacob mentioned as well, we would also then dedicate some sub-regional IPO meetings for presenting results or discussing case studies or peer learning exercises. Thank you. I pass the floor back to you, Jacob.
Thanks, Emanuela. Yeah, so that's a long list of proposed topics. We would, of course, want to narrow these down into actual chapters at a later stage. The number of topics that we can cover depends a little bit on how we arrange the cooperation and the research on these. Emanuela alluded to the fact that in some cases we have quite a bit of work that we already did on these topics. In other cases, we have potential partners that have done close work on these topics. So that remains to be decided a little bit later on. What would be interesting to hear at this stage is countries' reactions to these proposed topics, preferences, priorities. We've prioritized them so that the sequence that you see here reflects what we think a potential priority. Yeah, what makes sense based on the first IPO. But of course, you are free to comment on what is most relevant to your country and your region. Before we do a tour de table of each country, I would suggest that maybe Anders, if he wants, also just comments on the work of our section and the next IPO.
Thank you, Jacob. I just wanted to follow up on some of the things that my colleague said for clarity. I'll start with the meeting of the team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies. Just to point out that whatever we decide to do will have to have a mandate from the delegates at that meeting. So it's important to attend, especially, for instance, for the review in Armenia, to validate and confirm and request the activities that we do. Another point that Katja mentioned is we're following up internally on a mandate from the 2021 Commission, the ministerial level meeting, to mainstream the circular economy transition into our work. So that's also an aspect that we want to explore. Of course, we're going to do it in a pragmatic fashion, but we welcome ideas, and we also have another project on the circular economy that Katja is taking care of, and our colleague Ralph is going to coordinate as well. I also wanted to stress that we've been experimenting. We're trying to be innovative ourselves, which is much harder than to tell people to be innovative, with different approaches on streamlining the way we do reviews, and of course ensuring synergies with what we put in the IPO. And we've already taken several steps in Georgia and in Moldova, and in Armenia we're taking this a few steps further, where we try to have a standardized way of looking at the national innovation system, and then a standardized way of doing a deep dive into 2 or 3 specific topics that we agree with the country. We also have room for an additional review, or at least to get started on an additional review under the current envelope of funding. Then on the topics that we proposed, these are not necessarily chapters. We will have to think internally of how to splice and dice them. I think what's important now is to narrow this down a little bit and to flesh it out, and to get your comments, and also what you want to contribute, and specific questions that you want us to explore. I wanted to point out that all of these topics have a relatively firm foundation, both in the issues that we see in the sub-region and in the topics that we have covered in depth in some ways. For instance, in review chapters, where for Moldova we've been working on Diaspora, for Georgia on public procurement. So there is foundation behind all of them. but we need to set a few priorities and get a little bit of input from you. And then the final point is that we want to do policy dialogue around these topics. So, and we have some room for doing this, especially as long as we can do them in English and virtually. We can be more flexible in terms of bringing our experts to the table and having an informal discussion also to inform the chapters. So we welcome your feedback on that. We see this policy dialogue element and the cooperation as almost half of the intent behind this publication. So it's good to have the publication, but it's the process leading up to it and the dialogue that we will have and the learning that we can maybe help trigger is as important to my mind as per publication. In this spirit, we're also experimenting with having a series of podcasts. We call them Innovation Matters podcasts. We've recorded 4 already. We have a 5th one in planning, and then we plan to launch that at some point, maybe later in the year, and then bring them out at regular intervals. Right now, we're focusing on getting academics and talk about relatively broad issues such as the 4th Industrial Revolution. And we also have, by the way, one with our expert Charles Sedquist on holistic innovation policy. And here we also welcome your suggestions for good speakers, people who can explain well to a general, educated but not necessarily specialist audience, and also, of course, on topics that would be important to explore, and with a little bit more time than the normal constraints that we have in meetings. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anders. So let's proceed to a tour de table with inputs on our suggestions. You see the 7 topics that we propose on the screen, and if you could comment on our view or our perspective of the interim IPO, and also what its focus should be. We'll start with Armenia. Annie, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hello everyone. First, let me thank you, the Unicity team, for this dialogue and the valuable insights that you have provided. So we are looking forward to the IPO 1.5. And regarding the chapters, so let me, have you shared it on the screen or?
Yes, they are visible to me. I hope to you as well.
So I think that the first of the proposed topics, STI consoles, the mandates, functions, and lessons learned, are quite important for Armenia as well, because we have discussed during the first part of the meeting a lot. Armenia also doesn't have a high-level institutionalized body for coordinating innovation policy. So there is collaboration between the ministries, but it's more informal, so not on institutional level. So we will welcome any insights, any research outcomes that you can provide us for our future work, so that we can go for it. And the second is science and business linkages. So this has always been like a priority area for Armenia and for our ministry specifically. So we welcome if we choose this as one of the topics for the IPO. And the next one that we have selected is the export. Let me read the full name of the topic. Is the rise in export-oriented services in EESC countries. So Armenia is a landlocked country and has a small economy, so export promotion is a priority for us, and especially in service sector. So we have seen a boost in ICT sector in Armenia, and we'd like to move forward and try to boost the export level as well. So we will welcome this one as well. Yeah, these are the ones that we have selected. But we are good also with the Diaspora, using the Diaspora networks for innovation as well. As we all know, Armenia has a large diaspora, and we are always trying to to engage them. But there are also many studies conducted in this area. But there haven't been any actions for using the Diaspora network specifically for innovation purposes. So this can also be. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Ami, that was excellent. Very, very, very clear, and also clearly justified why Armenia would prefer those 3 or 4 topics. Okay, then I'd like to pass the floor to Azerbaijan, to Rashad. Are you here? Yeah, there he is. Hi, Rashad. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Jacob, for giving floor. Welcome, everybody. Firstly, I want one more time highly appreciate the role of this outlook, innovation policy outlook, for the countries that are researched. For example, for us, for Azerbaijan, that we are having the reforms in the innovation sphere since the 2018, and of course during the pandemic the processes slowed a little bit, but we are organizing the new forms, the new institutions are established, and as my colleagues from other countries mentioned, there are very different approach even in different bodies of one country. There are different approach to the understanding of innovation, of startups, and etc. And the unification is the one of the crucial issue and that's why this outlook played a great role, especially during our preparation of the national strategies or some law drafts that considered to regulate the innovative sphere, and having such recommendations as we had in the innovation policy outlook, it played a really great role to get the common understanding. So the next step of innovation policy outlook can bring more understanding to the other issues. And for us, we suppose that for Azerbaijan, the most maybe interesting topics at that step is the science-business linkage in the countries, especially the innovation network, because we had their change in their leadership of our ministry, the ministry responsible for high technology, and also we had new leadership in their Ministry of Education, and we have already signed the agreements and new understanding of how their education, how the science must be developed in the near future to play more strength role for innovations. That's why we'd like to accelerate the role of the business in that process. That's why this theme plays a great role for us. And the second topic for Azerbaijan that played the interest is the using the large potential procurement to create demand for and incentivize innovative initiatives, because our country, the state bodies pay attention to their PPP, public-private partnerships, and are trying to strengthen the involvement of their private sector to the projects. And we consider that innovations, we consider that the startups can also be brought to this project, and having their exchange of information, how it is done in other countries, what's the fail stories, what's the success stories in our other countries, can be very useful for us. And also this topic can bring the understanding which spheres in different countries are in the prior. For example, in our country, one of the priorities of the policy of the high leadership is their building their smart city projects, smart village, smart city, and etc. So in that field, it brings a great possibilities to their startups from Azerbaijan, but not only from Azerbaijan, but also from the other countries and maybe the other countries of our region. So we are open for cooperation in that field. But for that cooperation, absolutely necessary to have the network, strength network, and the exchange of information. So this is from our side what is doing, and thanks again for the work is done by the team, and be sure that the results of IPO is really used in the preparation of their new strategies in innovation sphere in Azerbaijan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rashad. Olga from Belarus, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, or still good morning again. Well, first of all, I would like to say that I didn't have enough time to discuss these topics with the State Committee for Science and Technologies, so I will try just now express my personal opinion, and we may come later on again. So the first topic seems quite interesting and challenging for all of us, especially after today's meeting in the morning. Then the second one, science-business linkages. Yes, we speak and spoke before a lot, and will speak again. So it is still a big challenge, and I think it could be of interest. The topics 3 and 5 are quite sensitive for Belarus at the moment, so we do not choose them. Innovation, performance, and infrastructure, yes, it could be of interest, similarly to the topic 6, using the large potential procurement. So that's it for now, but I will repeat again that I should consult with the bosses.
Right, Olga, yeah, there's no rush to make a decision, but it's good to get your preliminary impressions, and yeah, you can follow up in writing in the next days once you have confirmation. Great, then I would turn to Annie from Georgia, please. Annie, are you there? Annie seems to have left the meeting temporarily, so we would then turn to Olga from the Republic of Moldova.
Good afternoon, Jacob and dear colleagues. Thank you. You hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to participate to today's meeting. About the topics, all of them are very interesting and relevant. But I would stay on the following. The first, STI councils, as it was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. Moldova doesn't have such a council on innovation and never had. And according to, as far as I remember, from the draft chapters of Innovation for Development Review, we have a recommendation there to create such a council. That's why I think it would be good to have this topic on IPO. Science-business linkages is always actual, and we didn't get much progress here by now. I don't see a problem if the topics are the same in the IPO and in the Innovation for the Development Review, as I don't think we have to try a very large, to cover large fields from the beginning. Maybe it's better to focus on a few topics and make them work and then go broader. So next, I would say topic 4, innovation, performance and infrastructure. And topic 6 looks very interesting and new to us because we didn't have this topic by now. Using the large potential of procurement to create demand for and so on. And once again, I have to say that it's my opinion, and I have to agree the topics at a higher level and then come back to confirm them. Of course, high growth enterprises and rising export-oriented services are of much interest, but they are related to economy more, and I don't think I could be entitled to choose them. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Olga. Much appreciated. And last but not least, Ukraine. I think it will probably be Igor, Professor Igor Yegorov, who will speak.
Thank you very briefly. First of all, as to the first topic, I actually expressed my interest and the interest of, I had talks with the ministry yesterday, so they are really interested in this topic. We have also changes within the ministry, within the government, so it would be important. As to the topic 2, I think it's also very important, and we need some more or less specific recommendations for stimulation of this time of cooperation. I think that topic 2 and 4 are very interrelated, so you have to think about the merger of this topic. Okay, topic 3, I think it's too narrow for us, at least for us. We recognize the role of diaspora in R&D, but the role of diaspora in promoting innovation is relatively small and not significant, at least in our country. So it would be probably better to consider, the general problem of international cooperation in innovation sphere, and then with probably accent on diaspora, yes, in some countries, which could be, if it would be important for them. So topic 4 is definitely important. Topic 6, new but also important, and about probably last topic, I think that we will have some problems. As I understand, very few countries collect data on high growth enterprises. I understand that this is standard indicator for the European innovation industrial survey of industrial enterprises, but we have no statistics for such enterprises, high growth enterprises in our countries, at least in the bulk of them. So probably it would be better to consider at least, some kind of innovative SMEs. And if country has, high growth enterprises data for how they could, include this data into consideration. And the last point, our countries are different, different in size. At least, Ukraine is 10 times larger than Moldova or Georgia or Armenia, and for us it would be interesting and important to consider also regional aspects or regional dimension of innovation, or governance of innovation. So if it would be possible, I think we could include, this point into some other topics, but I have to stress that it's important for such large country as Ukraine. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Igor. I think it's really great to hear that you have all put quite a bit of thought into the potential topics to be covered by the next iteration. There seems to be, I would say, broad agreement with the prioritization that we undertook. So quite a bit of interest in topics 1 and 2. But also 4, 5, and potentially 6. What I would suggest is that we will gather the position of Georgia. Annie may come back to the meeting a bit later. She can express herself on this then, and that we prepare a short concept note on what we see as potentially the final selection of topics and what we could envisage as the content of the chapters, and that we then discuss this again in our in our next meeting. Anders, is there something that you wanted to add at this stage? Great, okay. We're running a little bit late, so I would suggest we then go to the next section and turn to our colleagues from the different international partner organizations who have all had a direct or indirect, but in any case, important role in the development of the innovation policy outlook. So the idea is here to get a brief overview of the status of relevant work streams, present a few salient findings, but really not go into much depth of regarding your findings and outcomes of your projects, given that we may plan more in-depth policy dialogue sessions with this group going forward. So if you could stick to 6 to 7 minutes, that would be much appreciated. We'll start with my dear friend and colleague Francesco Alfonso from OECD. He's the deputy head of the unit in the Global Relations Secretariat dealing with Eastern Partnership countries. Francesco, very glad to see you and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Jakob. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. And can you also see my slide, just to confirm?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Jakob. Thank you to all the organizers. It's always great to be part of these conversations and also to learn about what you do, but also about the policy developments in the region. So this morning, okay, we mostly heard about, in the first part, especially about innovation policy coordination mechanisms, some challenges which we learn are very present and spread, but also some good practices. So I must say all of this is very informative for us because, and it will be very relevant for our future work starting next year on the new iteration of the Sme Policy Index, which most of you know. Indeed, very briefly at DVCD, with the Sme Policy Index, we look at a number of different policy dimensions, including innovation policies, and we do so always with the perspective of creating the right conditions for the private sector to innovate. So in the most recent edition, which was published a little more than a year ago, we saw that our findings showed that if we take a medium-term perspective, the 6 countries are making some progress in developing their policy frameworks for innovation. Even though, and we learned this today as well, this is happening at different rates and with different intensity and different focuses depending on the countries. But then I think we should also ask ourselves, beyond policy, what is actually happening in the real sector. And okay, data you see here is from 2017, and I know this is a simple correlation, but it's clear that the 6 East countries still have a long way to go to create an environment where innovation actors have, on the one hand, the right incentives and the financial resources to invest, and where such efforts then successfully can translate into more innovation in the private sector. So the question is, in a way, what is the optimal degree? What should the government do, and what is the optimal degree of government involvement in this effort? This is a very debatable subject, but what is, how can I say, what we're sure of is that where government intervention certainly makes sense is in facilitating linkages between the public and the private sector, between academia, all the research institutions, industry, and financial service providers. And then we also, in a way, learned about another persisting challenge, and this not only in the East region, is that innovation is often, in a way, understood through the niche of high tech. And so as a consequence, for policymakers, oftentimes they tend to emphasize the search for high growth companies or, unicorns even among technology startups. So this is, of course, it's very important. It's a hot topic. It's very satisfying to work on this niche, but it's also important not to forget that other sectors can also drive innovation. They can invest in R&D, and we should not also overlook non-technological innovations such as managerial or marketing or more organizational aspects of innovation. And what I liked about the IPO is that this message is made quite clear in the IPO, which makes, in a way, a more inclusive, a call for a more inclusive understanding of innovation as a whole. So briefly moving forward, I'm sure we can draw a lot of ideas from your work and from this new iteration, and I would be very happy to, to continue exchanging on this topic and with you and with the counterparts in the countries. If I still have a couple of minutes, I just wanted 2 minutes. Perfect. Wanted to say a couple of things on one current project that we're working on, which is digitalization in the EESC region, because it is quite closely linked to innovation policy in the sense that the ecosystem of established and emerging digital technologies can bring about new opportunities and new ways for firms to experiment new business models, develop new products, and innovate. And do so ultimately increasing productivity. I'm rushing a bit, but I just wanted to share with you one slide which basically shows how, in a way, if what I just said is true at the firm level, so digitalization can bring positive benefits and increase productivity at the firm level, when we look at the aggregate level, in a way the story becomes a bit more puzzling. And what you see here is, if we take the last 20 years and we look at how productivity growth have changed, we see a clear slowdown across the board in OECD and EESC countries alike, and this is despite the availability of digital technologies. And okay, I don't have much time to do this, but in a way this can be seen as a bit of has been dubbed as a modern productivity paradox. There are many reasons for this. First is that countries have different rates of digitalization depending on the sectors and the sectoral composition of their economies. But mostly, and this is the one aspect I would like to stress the most, is that this aggregate picture hides a widening productivity gap between the so-called frontier and laggard firms. So we have a small share of highly productive firms which, with strong productivity growth, we tend to adopt more intense digital technologies. And then we have a larger group of laggard firms that stay behind. And I'll conclude with this, which basically shows how what happens in practice when we look at the business population with an eye of different enterprise size classes. So we see how smaller companies struggle to keep the pace of larger companies in adopting digital technologies. And what we try to do here is to think about both framework conditions that policymakers should think about to really build the skills and the right environment for the digital economy, but also about specific policy instruments to support SME digitalization. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks, Francesco. Francesco and his colleagues were really instrumental in peer reviewing the IPO, and our methodology is actually very much inspired by the methodology applied in the SME Policy Index. Francesco, we would very much like to invite you back to keep on updating us about your work and also present findings of your ongoing projects. One question that I would have for the discussion, I will first give the chance for the other speakers to briefly present and then have a discussion, is what the outputs are of your project on digital transformation of SMEs. Are these workshops? Is there a publication plan? I think this would be probably interesting for our partner countries to know. It's now my pleasure to welcome Mr. Sasha Wunsch-Vincent from WIPO. Sasha is a little bit the mastermind behind the Global Innovation Index, which was launched at a very impressive event last week. We look forward to hearing from you about some of the GII's main takeaways for this sub-region specifically, and also how you plan to follow up on this large body of analysis that you have conducted over the last months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to everybody, and thanks for giving us the floor again. So for a bit of a 12 months or 24 months now, we've had this regular exchange, and I'm quite happy about these growing ties between our organizations, which are quite complementary. So indeed, as you said, so we launched the GII last week, and the GII obviously at the outset is a ranking of countries, but what we do encourage on the basis of these rankings is an analysis of the innovation ecosystem, as we call it, and then, precisely to stimulate some of the interministerial or government level interactions that then take place, that you nourish with your work and that we on our end nourish with our work. So there's a lot of there's some countries in your region which are already heavily engaged with the GII. I mean, I'm thinking about Belarus, for instance, where really at the very highest level, this is built in some innovation law, and then we have these regular exchanges with the countries, and then there's others where it's not yet the case. Now, in terms of the high-level findings, I mean, to be very frank, we're just getting out of the big launch event, so we haven't distilled all the findings on the regional level. Okay, so I mean, the first and foremost question we asked in the GII is the impact of the crisis on the pandemic, in terms of innovation investments. And what's very interesting is, and what might not be really clear for everybody, is that we really entered the COVID pandemic on an all-time high in terms of innovation investments, whether you look at it in terms of R&D, venture capital, but also patenting, of course. If you take growth averages of the last decade, they far outperform GDP growth for sure, but also for the most part, any sort of innovation expenditure growth figures that we have historically known. So it's 2019 was really a high time. It's kind of important because frankly, what we are really facing, and my colleague from OECD just spoke about the divide between leading firms and laggard firms, so the star firms versus the laggard firms. But the same is true, of course, for on the country level, maybe actually in a much more accentuated way. So what as innovation economists we've been perplexed about or interested is to close the gap, right? To have more people jump on the bandwagon of innovation expenditures. And I think this is really happening. As you can see, OECD sees and we see on the ground, you really travel now to destinations in regions and in low-income countries who really have this innovation policy on the agenda, and that is quite encouraging. Of course, sometimes we have to move beyond just using the vocabulary innovation and in all different speeches and moving to real practical innovation expenditures and then outcomes, but that's good news. So that's how we went into the crisis, and of course the expectation historically from our perspective and using the work that has been done at OECD and also at WIPO would suggest a very harsh slump in innovation expenditures throughout 2020, 2021 in relation in particular to the GDP slump that we have experienced. Of course, history is not a good guide because the nature of this crisis was slightly different. And in that sense, we have good news to report in the GII. So in terms of government appropriations for R&D, so what governments are planning to spend on R&D, we've seen significant increase in expenditures in the top R&D spending countries. And when we did some analysis on the top R&D spenders, and again, this is what my colleague again from OECD calls the top firms, right? So they have, for the most part, increased their R&D expenditures throughout the crisis. This shouldn't hide, of course, that the impact is quite uneven across countries, right? So for the most part, I think it's about 7 out of 10 countries in the world still spend less than 1 percentage point of their GDP on R&D, and for most countries, including yours in the region, it's much less than that even. And there's huge sectoral divides. Some of them have to do with lead firms versus laggard firms within sectors, But then it's also sectoral divides which relate just to the impact of the crisis. I mean, some of them are obvious. So Netflix and has gained and Uber has lost, for instance, or the construction sector has gained to some extent, hardware sector, and the transport and aviation sector has lost. So this is it's quite important, I think, in your work and in our work, because we can't do this work alone, and OECD can't do it alone. So we really have to watch these sectoral and country-specific divergences of the crisis, and not fall for easy conclusions like, every crisis is an opportunity to innovate and we'll all come out stronger of the crisis. We all use this language in speeches, but I think for us as we're paid to produce evidence, and we really need to go beyond these hypes and look at the sectoral level as our colleague from OECD is doing on the SME level. So that was one major interrogation in the GII. The other, of course, relates to what has happened in the GII rankings. And again, I apologize, this is not specific to your region, but in terms of the most notable findings, you of course have some, core stability in terms of the top 20 players in innovation, with US and UK and these sort of countries leading, with the Republic of Korea making huge jumps forward, and the only economy outside of high-income countries really penetrating the top 20 for a while now is China still. With, in fact, what is interesting, I mean, I wouldn't call it stagnation, but it's not like we see many other middle-income economies getting anywhere close to the top 20. Even the top 30 seems to be some magic glass barrier, even for countries such as Malaysia, who, 20 years ago, we all would have thought, that by now they are amongst the ranks of certain OECD high-income economies in terms of innovation expenditure. We also do this sort of ranking on the cluster level. So this is something that might be a useful complement to you. We published the top 100 clusters. Of course, mostly they are not in your region, but we have a tail. I mean, to produce the top 100, we have a tail of data that possibly could be used. And I mean, from my humble travel in your region, I've come out mostly surprised what has happened in terms of mostly ICT sort of outsourcing clusters that your colleague mentioned, in Uzbekistan, but also Belarus, etc., Azerbaijan. So there's a lot of things happening now which we need to take beyond the level of, there is a cluster, but to actually measuring what the cluster's innovation expenditures and outcomes really are. Now, in terms of your region, so I'll share slides after the, we did a few slides on the region, but what I think is interesting is that it's quite a divergent path, right? So Ukraine is the top performer in the ranking, just in the top 50, the only country in the top 50 of the GII. And then you have Belarus with huge jumps forward, Georgia quite stable over time, Republic of Moldova with quite significant improvements, Armenia, and then Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan actually still at the rank 80, but having made both in the rankings and also in practice, as from what I could see, in person myself, quite important contributions and efforts over the last, let's say, 5 years or so. Then we split this thing up, so you can, on the webpage, and you can get your country reports where you can actually see the strengths, weaknesses, the relative performance of the specific countries along the pillars, human capital pillar and output pillar that we have at the GII. This will be much too detailed for this level, for this sort of meeting. But I hope it's it's a useful input to your deliberations, and I think it's now quite an established partnership. So we look forward with a limited resource means that we have, of course, to continue informing you about what we do at the GII, but also hopefully allowing you to use the GII in your analysis, and also vice versa, of course, to contribute to yours. So back to my colleagues in Geneva, next door, in fact. Thank you again.
Sasha, indeed, we've started to explore how our processes how we can create synergies between our processes. And we use the GI extensively for the IPO, especially the chapters on innovation performance, of course. I think, Sasha, it would be great if we could be in touch about doing a joint policy dialogue meeting, maybe even with an enlarged group of stakeholders, to introduce the GII in more detail, the findings specific for this region in more detail, and then comment and discuss the findings, the trends, the divergences, the outliers based also on our work. Let's be in touch about this. I know that you guys have just published the global, just had the global launch. So it's probably not something that we can do imminently, but in the next month or so, I think this would be a great topic for this type of forum. Let me then turn to the Joint Research Institute of the European Commission, and I'm delighted to give the floor to Eva Baltar. You will remember Eva from the very last physical meeting that we had with this group. It was in early March of last year, right at the brink of the pandemic outbreak in Europe. Eva's since become a trusted partner in many of our work streams, and will present JRC's work on technology transfer in your subregion.
Thank you, Jakob, and thank you, of course, for inviting JRC again. And we're very happy to be still collaborating with you in this project. And indeed, in that meeting in March last year in Geneva it's still my last mission that I had at the Commission. So hopefully we can get to travel again and see each other in person. I'm going to have a couple of slides. I hope you'll be able to see them. Can you see the slides?
They appeared briefly. I think you probably went on presentation mode now.
Yeah.
And it's dark for us. We don't see anything.
You don't see anything.
You can also put them up. Emanuela, maybe you can try to put them up if you don't mind.
I had them in presentation mode. Let me escape. Is this better? Or if not, I can just talk without the slides. It's not a problem.
It's cut off. So maybe if Manuela tries to put them up, but please start already.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'll just stop sharing them. So yeah, I'll just give a quick overview of the study, of what's the status of that, and also of what is the collaboration that we have been having, UNEC and JRC, in the last, I would say, year and a half, I think, and how we foresee this future collaboration as well. As many of you know, for the last year and a half, the JRC has been working on this technology transfer study in 12 EU neighboring countries, including the 6 countries of the Eastern Partnership. And we did the study as a request of some of the governments of the Eastern Partnership, because they wanted a bit more of support specifically in this area of tech transfer. So this is why we launched this study, and basically, so it's a diagnostic and benchmarking overview of the tech transfer ecosystems of the countries. And basically, it's we wanted to know who is who in the area, which are the main players, and which are the strengths of the ecosystems, but of course, which are the weaknesses. So we could provide tailored recommendations on how we believe we could overcome these challenges. And these recommendations, which are very specific and, as I said, tailored for each country, we just don't see them as a one-off recommendation. So we would like them to inform both on the Commission side, to inform new policies and programs to support innovation and tech transfer, but also these should be useful as well for the managing authorities of the countries themselves, so they could also apply a few recommendations. Where we are now, we have already finished all the country level analysis of the tech transfer ecosystems. We presented the results of this work in a workshop in early July this year, and the reports have been published during the summer. They are available on the JRC website should you wish to take a look at them. And right now what we're doing, the expert team is working on the benchmarking and then comparative analysis of the different tech transfer ecosystems of these countries. They are using a set of technology transfer indicators that builds upon the work that previous GRC work that we did on this area of indicators, and we'll also be using a set of qualitative indicators where appropriate. I'll not get into details of this because the report is still work in progress, and we hope to have it published in the next few months. So yeah, before the end of the year, it should be publicly available for everybody. I already presented in previous sessions which are the main findings of the work. Now that we finished the 12 analyzing the 12 countries, the main gaps are basically very similar to all the different ecosystems, both in the eastern neighborhood and also in the south neighborhood of the EU. The main conclusion, as you can already imagine, is that there are not many linkages, and if they are, they're not strong enough between science, academia, and industry. And this is because of different causes, let's say. First and foremost, of course, is that mainly there is not enough expenditure in R&D in the countries. So if there is not enough R&D results, we definitely will not have enough innovations to transfer to the market. There are also other challenges in different aspects, ranging from policies, that maybe there are not enough policies and legislation that promote actively technology transfer, or maybe they're not really well implemented. Not enough financial instruments or incentives, both for academia and also from industry to engage with one another. Regarding technology transfer, we need these intermediate bodies to help connect business with academia, and in many situations it is not really well developed, or maybe they don't even exist, or if they do, they're not fully developed in the sense that they don't have enough people, enough skills, or enough budget to operate efficiently. And to finish, I just want to give a quick overview of how we've been collaborating so far, both organizations, and what we foresee our collaboration in the near future. Since I think we both launched our studies, we have been in quite close contact, always sharing information. Our studies have fed into each other's work. I have been participating in quite a few IPO meetings and gatherings so far, and of course I'm happy to keep doing so. And Unicity also kindly participated in the launch of our study in this July, so we're also very grateful for having you with us in that workshop. We have also been participating in the Innovation for Sustainable Development review of Moldova. I have reviewed 2 of the chapters of this report on tech transfer infrastructures and linkages as well. And given that the collaboration has been good so far, we of course are happy to keep this going, and also why not discuss how we can even take this forward maybe in a different way, or more close cooperation even. So we would be happy to organize a joint meeting with the GRC and also with you to discuss in further detail these topics and how we can better collaborate together and how we can better support these countries, given that we both share the same remit and we're working this similar area and working with all the same stakeholders. So we're very happy to have this policy dialogue, and yeah, we're looking forward to it. And regarding the next IPO, the new iteration, we have seen that there are different chapters that you're still thinking of that would be incorporated in this new IPO. Should one of the chapters be science, businesses, linkages, something related to this topic, we would be also happy to collaborate more closely on this work, and yeah, even we can think of co-creating it together, this chapter. But yes, this is something that we would be happy to do so. And on our side of the Commission, we would like also to take the work that I have been doing on the study, also take it forward. So in the last couple of months, the Commission has been working on what we called the post-2020 deliverables for the Eastern Partnership. And this has been in discussion for a while. And we are proposing a set of research innovation deliverables. And within these deliverables, we have one that will be devoted for technology transfer, will be the definition of technology transfer roadmaps. We will know more towards the end of the year when there will be a summit with all the managing authorities of both the member states and also the Eastern Partnership countries. We will know more about this, but this is something we could also discuss in due time if we can also see some room for collaboration on these roadmaps for UNEC. And that will be everything from my end. Thank you all for your attention. Back to you, Jakob.
Thanks, Eva, and big thanks for JRC's input on our analyses over the last month. And there's indeed a lot of scope for us to further deepen our cooperation. And I think using this forum as a basis for presenting in more detail your work on technology transfer would definitely be very welcome. And why not even have a co-authored chapter on this topic in the next IPO, but to be determined in the next weeks. So our final speaker from our international partners is Ludmila Nistor. She's from Horizon Europe. She's new to this group, so a very warm welcome to you. We've leveraged the work of Horizon Europe extensively for the IPO, especially the peer reviews by the Policy Support Facility. So although you are new to this group, the work and the great analysis that you have conducted is not. So we look forward to your presentation. Please go ahead.
Hello. I'm new in this group and I'm new in RTD, so I'm really happy to join you today. I'm trying to share my presentation. If not, I will kindly ask Emma to do so. So let's see. Let's see what you see.
Yeah, we see the presentation. Thank you.
You see the presentation. I see the sign. It's loading. Okay. Okay, so oops, just a moment. So, okay, just good morning. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Ludmila Nistor-Mikhailova, working for RTD Unit 04 Horizon Association, dealing with the international cooperation, the unit that co-develops with other RTD directorates and DG's strategic R&I investment agenda for key sectors of the economy, and that accelerates the social transition for sustainable Europe equipped with a competitive R&I driven industry by 2030. So for this event, I was asked to elaborate on the background of Horizon in Eastern Europe and the South Caucasus and explain the work we are doing and potential synergies, complementarities with IPO. So I believe the presentation will satisfy the demand, but if you have other questions, I will be happy to take them on board. I was granted 7 minutes. I will try to stick to it, and I hope I will feel it. So to start with Horizon Europe, the first slide. So this is investing to shape the future for a sustainable, fair and prosperous future for people and planet based on Europe values by tackling climate change, helping to achieve sustainable development goals, and of course, boosting the union's competitiveness and growth. So oops. You are taking control of my presentation, yeah? Right.
Actually, it was, I think, Emanuela that put it up in the first place. So just let us know if you want to jump a slide and she will gladly do it for you.
Okay, thank you. That's why I see it. Okay, thank you very much. So to start, Horizon Europe, so it's a very ambitious EU research and innovation framework program to run for a period of next 7 years from 2021 to 2027. And the main purposes are to strengthen the EU scientific and technological basis and the European research area, to boost Europe's innovation capacity, competitiveness and jobs, and to deliver on citizens' priorities and sustain on socioeconomic model and values. So the budget is 95.5 billion, the Horizon Europe budget. So for the next slide, you can see the scheme it's following. The program facilitates collaboration and strengthens the impact of research and innovation in developing, supporting and implementing EU policies while tackling global challenges. So different budgets are allocated on these different pillars that you can see now on the screen. To move forward is to present you the international cooperation, which is the bone for the proper functioning and implementation of the Horizon Europe in tackling together global societal challenges, access to the world's best talents, expertise and resources, and hence supply and demand of innovative solutions. So via association to the program, the international cooperation is implemented. So the international cooperation openness is balanced with the promotion of EU strategic autonomy. So currently our unit is finalizing the association to Horizon Europe, heading towards the signature of association agreements with the Western Balkans, Turkey, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia. So we hope by the end of 2021 these agreements will be fully in force. And this is as a result of formal negotiations held with these countries over the summer. So here we believe that for the purpose of your meeting, it is worth mentioning the European Innovation Council introduced by the European Commission to support the commercialization of high-risk, high-impact technologies in the European Union. So the fully fledged European Innovation Council was launched in March 2021 under Horizon Europe, and is part of European Innovation Council and SME Executive Agency. So its goal is to aid researchers, startups and SMEs, small and medium enterprises, bring their innovations to market by providing funding, networking, partnership opportunities, and business acceleration services. So it has a budget in total of 10 billion. As you can see already, some calls already launched in April. And the European Commission has announced the second round of direct equity investment through this European Innovation Council. And then we summary together. So since its launch in 2020, the EESC fund has now approved 111 investments in highly innovative startups and small and medium-sized business SMEs, totaling all over together 500 million euros. For the regional cooperation, it's mainly the Eastern Partnership, is a joint initiative, as you know, of European Union. Its members are Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, and Republic of Moldova and Ukraine. So it was launched in 2009. It works under RNI is discussed in the EIP platform forum. And there is a panel or research and innovation. EU and Eastern Partnership countries stepped up cooperation on innovation with the EU for Innovation Initiative. So this combines all EU activities that support the development of Eastern Partnership countries' innovation capacities, notably those funded under Horizon 2020 program and the European Neighbourhood Instrument. So there are, here you can see also the what my colleague from GRC just presented, so I will not specify on that. EIP partners are interlinked in their activities through the opportunities offered in the Horizon Europe to discuss and explore more. As EU is signing with associated countries association agreements, we believe that it was important to discuss about the governance that you discussed today is the Joint Research and Innovation Committee, where apart from assessing the evaluation and reviewing the implementation of the agreement itself, in particular, both parties can discuss upon one of other party requests, restrictions applied or planned by the parties on access to their respective research and innovation programs, including in particular for actions related to their strategic assets, interest, autonomy or security. They also can examine how to improve and develop cooperation, discuss jointly the future orientation and priorities of policies, and also exchange information. And furthermore, which is fresh now, on 28 September, Council agreed on a global approach to research and innovation. The new global approach to research and innovation sees the Horizon Europe program as the central framework for the facilitation of international R&I cooperation. Of course, we have to mention the European Research Area, which is a system of scientific research programs integrating the scientific resources of the EU. And the European Innovation Council I already mentioned before. Here are some statistics. I will not just, you see that it's a overall interest from participating in this, growing interest in participating in this programs from one program to another. And then moving just to the next slide, we can see that EIP cooperation. Next slide. EIP cooperation aimed to develop further after the 2020 deliverables, as already my colleague from GRC mentioned. So we need in order to develop further the agenda. This already started on the 20th of March, so 18th of March 2020, when the joint communication was published, outlining the long-term policy objectives for future cooperation. It was followed by the joint working document in 2021, for recovery, resilience, and reform post 2020. All this is supported by with the overall objective, of strengthening resilience and generating concrete benefits to the people. The new agenda will be structured around two pillars: the investment and governance. And top 10 targets for 2025, plus the flagship initiatives to contribute, maximizing impact and visibility on the ground, already shaped with concrete proposals for the post-2020 priorities in R&I. For a resilient digital transformation and integrated economies. As you can see here, the proposal. So all this will be supported together with the architecture of the EIP, and we hope that this will be all adopted and endorsed in the EIP summit in December this year. So I tried to be very brief. This would be all from me. Thank you very much for having me here. I would just want to ask a colleague to share, Christopher Ati, I think, to share the information on Moldova, and it will be ready because I'm really interested.
Thanks, Ludmila, for this comprehensive overview. I think it's high time that you become part of this group, and we're very glad that you were able to join today. We're running a little bit late, so I will open the floor here for questions to our four partner organizations. Just feel free to raise your hand and comment on the presentations or ask any questions. Thank you. There are no questions, and maybe Anders, you may wish to comment on kind of our overarching strategic cooperation plans with other international organizations, and we can move to the next final segment.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you to colleagues from partner organizations for their comments and contributions and kind words. I just wanted to flag a few ideas that we would like to explore further, and we can discuss later based on the comments that you made and a few discussions that we've had. Of course, OECD has been with us in some way, shape, or form in the beginning. We also work quite a bit on high growth enterprises, and we're reviewing each other's publication. And of course, the Sme Policy Index served as part of the inspiration behind the innovation policy outlook. So it's important to keep that on board and to look at what we are doing and to participate, because our objectives overlap quite a bit with the Eurasia program. On WIPO, of course, we always get the question, what is the difference between PII and the innovation policy outlook? We know the response to that. We've discussed it, but it's still a question that keeps coming up. And since we cover governance, and since the GII covers innovation inputs and outputs and what we can call innovation performance, we're very open to taking a few further steps. In particular, I think would make sense, as Sasha mentioned, to have a policy dialogue session where we look into depth into the results of GII and what they tell us, and what our analysis from our side can contribute to elucidate the underlying reasons for the divergences that we see. And maybe also turn that into a section in a framing chapter where we take the GII data and we look at some trends, of course, in partnership with WIPO. With JRC, we also have a strong and growing relationship on several different areas, and there's also quite a bit of overlap there, especially the work on ecosystems, technology transfer, and linkages. Here, we could envisage, if, let's say, we do a chapter on science-business linkages, we could have a section on, let's say, the technology transfer work that JRC has already developed, and also a policy dialogue session on that. With Horizon 2020, we're very happy to see them here. Of course, this is a pretty substantial budget, and there are many opportunities here, and we should make sure that what we contribute helps countries in the Eastern Partnership region take better advantage of these opportunities. Specifically, though, there's one output that's coming from Horizon 2020 that we could draw on for a section of a chapter, and that's the peer reviews of the research system in countries, which is similar in approach and scope to what we are doing, except that it's focused clearly on the research system and then goes a little bit into science-business linkages. This has been done for many countries, and there's definitely room to have a section in the chapter to pull all that together. And finally, we are in the process of raising funds for scaling up and also continuing our activities. And of course, here the link to JRC and Horizon 2020 is particularly important, but also partnerships overall. And I'd like to thank the participants here, and we look forward to working with you more further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anders, and thank you to our four speakers. We'll close the session, move to the last session now, where we have, I think, a final presentation slide. The item we wanted to discuss with this group is regarding the mandate and modalities of this group going forward. You will remember when we first met with this group, it was in Minsk in early 2019, I think, so more than 2.5 years ago. We were just 7 or 8 participants, and we focused on the initial planning of the IPO pilot project. And since then, this group has grown significantly in terms of participation, in terms of the scope of what we cover, the frequency of meetings, but I think also in terms of the trust and the value of our discussions. We have received feedback from many of you to continue leveraging this group going forward, to put it at the center, if you like, of our cooperation with your countries on innovation. So we have put together if you like, an outline of how we see, or what we see the mandate and the modalities of this group in terms of the objectives, the core members, and also the modalities of the actual meetings, with a general objective to support innovation as a driving force for sustainable development, and more specifically to serve as a coordination group for innovation policy support, especially on the innovation, especially but not exclusively on the innovation policy outlook process, and to also ensure sustainability and continuity of these processes, to also serve as a think tank to develop policy findings and recommendations for analytical and written outputs. This refers to our purpose of using this group to discuss the elective topics of the next iteration of the IPO, and then more widely also act as a hub for policy dialogue, so a forum to discuss sub-regional issues of common concern and to present national practices and work streams to the benefit of all the 6 countries. So those would be the objectives. In terms of the membership or participants. Of course, these are first and foremost the focal points from each country, the national focal points, the independent experts that are present today and that have been involved in many of our work streams, leading international experts on topics of relevance to this group, like Professor Edquist from this morning, our international partner organization, but also relevant offices and organizations on the ground, namely the embassies of Sweden, the UN regional coordinator offices, and other local offices that regularly support our work. In terms of the meeting modalities and frequency, we would suggest to meet at least quarterly. We would, as the UNEC Secretariat, propose the topics and the agenda of the meetings like we did for today. But then there are different formats that are possible where we would like to receive your feedback on. We have let's say the current format, which is quite focused and restricted in terms of participation. We could also envisage to continue with this format, but have a policy dialogue meeting on a separate day, with which we would open to a broader participation group and also implement broader outreach. Or we could have a separate, let's say, more informal type of meeting with guest speakers, where we as a relatively small group informally discuss and brainstorm about the different topics and projects that we are implementing. So that's just in a nutshell, I would say, the how we see our cooperation with this group going forward. And it would be great to hear, maybe Anders, you wish to comment first, and then we would hear from each country briefly if this is something that responds to your requirements and what you would potentially add to this outline.
No, I would like to hear from countries first, and then I can see.
Okay, so let's do a tour de table, starting with Azerbaijan. Rashad, are you there? I think he will join in a minute. So then let's move to Armenia. Annie, please.
Yes, Jakob, as the last time during the third meeting of the National Focal Points, I reconfirm our commitment, to work together and use this platform, the network of focal points for regular meetings and for policy dialogue. So it works for us. We are ready to collaborate and to have these regular meetings.
Thank you, Hani. Belarus, Olga, please.
Well, thank you. I also think that the idea to make it on a regular basis is very good. We support. We are ready to contribute, and actually, apart from the 3 formats, I do not see any points for discussion here. So about 3 formats, why should we choose one for long time? I think it could depend on the nature of the topic, because one topic could be stick to informal little group of experts, but the other needs more, let's say, more people involved and more dissemination. So I think it could be combination. Thank you.
Yes, I think that these suggestions were not meant to be mutually exclusive and can be adapted to the context and needs of the given topic and type of meeting we want to have. Okay, then I would pass the floor to Georgia, please. Annie, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jacob. So on behalf of Georgia's Innovation and Technology Agency, let me express our readiness to be involved in these committee meetings with national contact points, and it's essential that we are not starting from the, let's say, from the new page. It's like we already have the basis for the collaboration between our 6 countries. We have this comparative assessment. We knew the results and the baseline, so it's essential to have this kind of regular meetings within each other and discuss the issues regarding the policy planning and also the implementation processes, what we already started to implement depended on the recommendations on those 2 studies, for instance, in Georgia's case, which was Innovation Policy Outlook and also Innovation for Sustainable Development Review, because as you are well aware, Georgia benefited, let's say, in 2 terms. We had these 2 kinds of documents, and also we express our readiness to contribute some other studies where we want to improve our global innovation index. So it's essential to be the partner in this format. We have a partner from BIPO as well, and also share the good practices with the countries in our region. So in the format, I think that we will see in the working process which format will be more beneficial, let's say, the frequency of the meetings. Thank you, Jacob, once again.
Yeah, I see that Rashad is online, so I would ask Rashad to also comment.
Thanks, Jacob.
From Azerbaijan.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I mentioned, this policy outlook plays a great role, but we also must understand, take into consideration, we are trying to do it in Azerbaijan, that different stakeholders have sometimes different points. That's why for more concrete results of our outlook for our work, it's better to have the separate meeting for the national focal points that are working on this work, and of course have there sometimes maybe combining with more wide participant list due to the themes that can be. So we express our readiness to take participation in all these meetings. Also, I'd like to mention one thing, Jacob. We maybe need to have the letter for appointing the second national focal point. As you know, Mr. Elvir Velizadeh, that was the deputy minister, now is working in another organization. He moves to the presidential administration. From one side, it's a good thing that he will take into consideration his work, all he got here, but maybe we need to having the letter to appoint another person, high-level person, at least at the level of deputy minister. Maybe from our minister, maybe from another. This point must be taken into consideration. So thank you.
Thank you, Rashad. Yes, that would be no problem. We can touch base bilaterally on the content of that letter. Moldova, please. Olga.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. I would like to confirm once again our engagement to and will to future cooperation. And I think those informal meetings would be very useful to to discuss more in depth some specific topics. And also it's very important to discuss the implementation of your recommendations.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Moldova. And last but not least, Igor, please, Ukraine.
Thank you. We also agree that we will continue this work. You know, this is very important for our country. The problem is that we have also some changes within the Ministry of Education and Science, and I still have to approach, you know, officials in this ministry simply to confirm this, but I think there will be no problem at all. As to the formats, I think the current format is okay, but I think it could be supplemented by some other forms if we will need it with them, you know. So if we will need, you know, some discussion, you know, for with some guest speakers, you know, we can arrange, I think, that this kind of discussion also, and organize a combination with NPP regular meetings. So it's also possible, as I understand. So but in principle, of course, I agree that we will continue this work. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Igor. So I think we can conclude that the modalities I described, the support for the modalities that I described, and for this group to continue meeting and to deepen its cooperation, but that we, of course, remain flexible about the exact format, that we potentially try out different options depending on the focus of the meeting, and then take it from there. What we will do in our meeting summary is describe these modalities and the mandate of this group in a little bit more detail and share with you, so that you can also discuss this within your government bodies. It's 12:30. We have one item left, which is the closing of our meeting, the wrap up. I see that Anders' hand is already up. So Anders, thank you. The floor is yours.
Good. Thank you, Jacob. Let me just start with saying a few things about the policy dialogue issue, and then I'll do a brief summary and wrap up. I think the goal here is to have a little bit more in-depth discussions around the topics and that we will cover in the chapters, and a little bit more exchange. I think we noted today that it was a little bit stressed, and Charles was not able to go into much depth. And of course, it's a very complex topic. And I think as long as we're working with virtual meetings, can keep them relatively informal and can rely on you to engage participants from your country, there is quite a bit of room to do also separate sessions and also more sessions. We will leave this up to you. I think what we can do is to prepare a proposal of how this could work over the next year. Some topics we might cover in connection with the national focal point meetings. Some topics, for instance, topics that are where we need to do some fact finding and need to get some guidance, and topics that are of broader interest, maybe we can do separately. But I think we'll think about it internally and prepare a suggestion on that point. Good. With that, I'd like to thank all the participants for their input. I think we had a very interesting discussion on innovation councils and coordination, and the need for a holistic perspective, and also the need to experiment to find out what works. As you noted, in Sweden, they tried to have an overarching innovation council that included research, but it turned out that the topic of research and public funded research was different in nature and scope, also for legacy reasons. This might not apply in other countries. So they tried it out, they saw it didn't work, and they found a solution that worked better. And that's the process that we would recommend for countries to follow as well. I think we can say a few things that are good ideas in most cases. Relatively broad participation, regular meetings with minutes, transparency, clear mandate, some kind of strong secretariat support and high-level patronage. and also high level of transparency. We then turn to the review of our work. I won't go into the details there, we note your appreciation of these areas of work, and we will also go back and think carefully about the feedback that you gave about the topics to cover, and come up with a concept note that explains in some level of detail what we want to put in each chapter and what we want to cover. And maybe we can also think about an online platform where we can share these documents and exchange comments about it, and where you can also make suggestions about what can be included on your side, maybe country case studies and issues like that. On partnerships, I think we see great potential in coming together with four organizations presented here, so OECD, WIPO, JRC, and Horizon 2020, and both in terms of joint policy dialogue sessions and in terms of working together on some of the chapters, drawing from relevant work from other sources such as GII and Horizon 2020 peer reviews. I also wanted to stress that we're in the process of looking for follow-up funding for our work, and maybe also expand the scope of our work. And for that, your engagement is important. To contact, for instance, potential donor organizations. We will send around a couple of concept notes that you can use in doing so. But country engagement is extremely important in raising these funds, and we will ask for your support on that in the future, and also, of course, your ideas. So I think to follow up, we should relatively quickly be able to get out a report summarizing the session, and then I think we will need some time, but we will then also come out with a concrete suggestion for the structure of the IPO and the policy dialogue sessions, and get your feedback on that point. And in the meantime, of course, your comments are appreciated. Thank you very much, once again, to the delegates, to the speakers, to my colleagues from the Secretariat, and I wish everyone, well, for us it's lunchtime, for you I know it's not, but we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.